Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first online Gentleman's Hour. Now, our plan is to be able to do this every Tuesday at this time, 4 o'clock, and so we hope that you could come and join us every week, at least for as long as we are quarantined. Now, after the quarantine, we will decide whether we will push through with this or we will end this. But for now, and as long as we're on quarantine, we will be here every Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And what we really want to be able to do in our session together is to be able to discover basically what does it mean to be a gentleman? What does it mean to be a man in today's culture and with everything that we are facing today, with all the stresses of life, and the challenges and the difficulties, as well as the joys and the laughter and family and the good things. How does a man deal with all of this? And it doesn't matter whether you are single or married or single again. It doesn't matter whether you are a student or a business owner or an employee. A man is a man regardless of where he is. In other words, being male and being a man, not just male, but being a man is not determined by your surroundings. Being a man is not determined by your situation or by your circumstances. It is who you are inside. And that's what this is all about. So we're going to be answering questions like, what does it mean to be a man? And of course, we're going to be talking about married men as well. And our desire is to be able to figure out, like in the challenges that we face in society, how do we men stand up? How do we behave like men in all of this? Now, as you may probably know by now, we also will have a ladies' night, a ladies' hour. And in it, we will be talking about, of course, ladies and what does it mean to be a lady? What does it mean to be a woman in today's culture? And I'm still praying about it, but I'm thinking probably of also having something for parenting. Parenting today is very, very challenging. And I know I've got 3 kids of my own. Well, they're not kids anymore, but I've got 3 of my own. And hopefully I did a few things right. And maybe that might give me some credibility on whether I can share a few things from my own experience, from the Word of God, and some of my own studies. But for now, we're talking about gentlemen. I just want you to know also that this is not live stream, so you may have some questions that you'd like to ask. And so write down here on the comment section, write down what your questions are, whatever it is about this particular session, and maybe something that we might not be covering in this episode, but maybe in future episodes. But you're thinking ahead and would like to be able to, for me to deal with certain issues. So go ahead, write down your suggestions, write down your comments, and if the answers to your questions are short, then perhaps I can answer them right here in the comment section below. But if it requires a little bit more explanation, a little bit more insight, then I can always answer it in the first part of the next episode that we're going to have. So for now, once again, welcome to the Gentleman's Hour. And what we would like to do today is to be able to answer the question, what is a gentleman? What is a gentleman in light of today's culture, in light of the challenges that we face today? Are there even gentlemen? Of course, I'm not just talking about being a man, but you got to be a man first before you can even be a gentleman. But at the same time, I want to be able to qualify that. You can be a gentleman even at a very young age. But to be a true gentleman, it requires some manliness. And we're going to deal with that over the next several episodes. And let's see what we can learn together. And I think most of you watching will be men. I hope so. Okay, but because this is not on a closed circuit system like Zoom or Facebook Messenger or something like that, there will be ladies that will be watching this as well. And of course, you are welcome to join us. And hopefully, this will give you an idea of what men should be like. And perhaps you are a single lady and available, and you're looking for someone perhaps that, maybe you're completely single, don't even have a boyfriend, and now you're thinking, what's the right kind of guy that I want to have in my life? Or maybe you already have a boyfriend and you're wondering, is this guy really for me? Is this the kind of guy I want to be with for the rest of my life? Well, hopefully, we will be able to answer some of those questions, maybe not directly, but as you listen, you might begin to think, you know what, maybe this boyfriend I have is a jerk, and maybe I don't want to end up with him for the rest of my life. I think I can do better than this, perhaps. Or maybe you have the best catch right now. And hopefully, in this episode and in the coming episodes, you will be able to discern more carefully whether the person you have with you right now is the right person or not. Or perhaps you are a mom or a dad and would like to be able to raise up gentlemen among your sons. And maybe your son right now is only 5 years old or 10 years old or 15 or even older. It's never too late to learn how to be a gentleman. Anyone can be a gentleman, but it does take some effort. Okay? And we're going to be talking about that in the next few minutes. Now, as we start, I want you to understand that just based on what I've said so far, it's becoming obvious that being or becoming a gentleman is not automatic. Okay? It requires training. It requires a form of, if I might say, discipleship. Okay? I was raised by my mom to be a gentleman, and for that I will be forever grateful to my mom. But she taught me how to be a gentleman, even if I remember correctly, probably as early as about maybe 5, 6 years old or somewhere thereabouts. She taught me how to be a gentleman, and so as you can see now, I'm dressed for the part, right, and all of that, because it's part of being a gentleman. But we'll see that a little bit later on. But even as young as about 5 or 6 years old, she started teaching me some basic things like opening the doors for women, whether it be door of the home or door of a car, or maybe going into a hotel or a restaurant. How to open the door. And do you pull the door? Do you push the door? These are different things that are taught. They're not automatic. And even if you watch films like James Bond, for example, okay, he may behave like a gentleman there, and he does. But if you're not really watching, you just think it's part of the script, it's part of the act. After all, he is an actor. James Bond doesn't exist, So it might just be part of the movie, and you don't pay too much attention to it. But my mom took the time to actually train me every day. And she would have this small ruler or anything that she might have in her purse or on her person. And if we go into the car, and if I go into the car ahead of my mom, she won't enter the car. She will actually wait outside until, I'm in the car waiting for her to come in so we can go to the mall or whatever it is, right? And she refuses. She'll just stay outside because a lady doesn't open her own door. And so she had to teach me that. And so I would run out of the car, go to her side, and she would take out her little ruler or whatever she has, her fan, her abanico, and she would just tap me on my wrist. As I opened the door, she would tap me and say, "Don't forget to open my door next time." Okay? And so I would learn. It's not enough to be painful, but just to get the point across. You don't forget, because there will be consequences. Okay, so little things, and she would teach me little by little, just adding every week, adding a little bit more, and reviewing the other things so that I don't forget. And even as simple things as saying, yes please, no thank you. These are little things that we overlook today. And we find that a lot of young people today don't really know how to talk. They don't know how to address the older generation, with the respect that is due them. That's part of being a gentleman, or a lady for that matter. And so, unfortunately, we don't find too many gentlemen today. We find a lot of boys, and some boys are 40 or 50 years old, and they may look like men, but they're not. They're boys. But we'll reserve that for another time. Okay? It's important to understand that being a gentleman is a way of life. And I know that sounds so cliche, but it's true. Being a gentleman is a way of life. It's a way of living. It's a way to look at life, to respond to life, and all of that. It's all of these things combined. Okay, so it's more than just behavior. It's more than just good manners. It's more than just opening a door for a lady or having proper manners and stuff like that. Okay, it includes it's a way of thinking. It's a way you approach life. It includes even your fashion, how to dress appropriately, depending on the occasion. I find it disturbing, for example, that even in weddings today, I mean, people show up in weddings wearing sports shirts and jeans. I mean, of course, there's no rule that says you can't come in sports shirt and jeans. There's no, and especially if you're related to the couple getting wed, then they're probably not going to kick you out. But still, it shows, if I might say so bluntly, a lack of breeding. We have to learn how to dress appropriately, but more about that in a little while. So it includes fashion. It includes how you carry yourself, your bearing, and understanding that it's not just wearing a nice suit or a nice shirt, okay, and the appropriate accessories to go with it. It includes your behavior, it includes your attitude, your mindset, your paradigms, your worldview. All of these things are part of being a gentleman. It includes your speech, how you talk, how you present yourself, how you express your ideas, how you even express your emotions. There may be times where outbursts are called for, but a gentleman knows how to keep his cool. And so we're going to be looking at that as we go along as well. So understand that it goes beyond just behavior. Because if it's just that, like opening doors, then we're missing the whole point of what it is to be a gentleman. And so because it is your paradigm, your worldview, your whole outlook on life, your attitude towards life, it will affect your social skills. It will affect your decorum, your manners, your self-confidence, and so much more. Being a gentleman is, well, literally, like I said, a way of life. Now, to be understanding as well that being a gentleman includes having your sense of security rooted in something outside of what you wear, outside of your education. See, you don't have to be educated in an expensive school to be a gentleman, okay? But it requires, part of being a gentleman is having a self-confidence in who you are. It's not based, it's not based on the kind of watch you wear or your other accessories. It's not about the car you drive or where you live, and all of that. These are all trappings. You might have a nice watch, you might have a nice ring, you might have an earring, or whatever it is. You might even wear a tie. But wearing a tie does not make you a gentleman. It might help. But remember, a gentleman is a way of looking at things, a way of your lifestyle, really. So it affects everything about who you are. But because it's who you are on the inside, then you can be a gentleman even if you're wearing a t-shirt and a pair of shorts. And you can be in a beach and playing, with your family and friends and playing volleyball or going swimming and still be a gentleman. It's how you are. And you can, if you're a gentleman, you can spot a gentleman afar off. But I'm going ahead of myself. Now, what does it mean to be not just a gentleman, but a Christian gentleman? Because that's the highest form of being a gentleman. And I'd like to think that Jesus was a gentleman. Even as he fellowshipped, as it were, and mixed around with sinners and prostitutes and just the low life, as it were, of his time. There was something about him that made him stand out, and it's really different. But maybe we've never considered that. Like, what? Jesus, a gentleman? Well, I think so. These are things that I see, maybe because of my training, but these are some of the things that I see, and I'd like to be able to prove that to you a little bit. Let me start off with a passage of Scripture in Philippians chapter 2 and verses 5 to 9. Let me go ahead and read it in the easy-to-read version, and this is what it says. In your life together, think the way Christ Jesus thought. He was like God in every way, but he did not think that his being equal with God was something to use for his own benefit. Instead, he gave up everything, even his place with God. He accepted the role of a servant, appearing in human form. During his life as a man, he humbled himself by being fully obedient to God, even when that cost his death on a cross. So God raised him up to the most important place and gave him the name that is greater than any other name. Amazing. Now, I realize that being a gentleman is not the original context of this particular passage in Philippians chapter 2. But if we're going to look at it from our topic's perspective, you will find a lot of gentlemanly traits in the very persona of Jesus Christ. And I think if anyone is a gentleman, it would be Jesus Christ. And so we're going to look at him and look at these verses and let's unpack these verses a little bit just to give us some idea of what Jesus was like when he was here on earth. Now in verse 6, he said he was like God in every way, but he did not think that his being equal with God was something to use was for his own benefit. So the first thing we see here is that he's not boastful. He didn't go around saying, hey, do you know that I'm God? Do you know that I am eternal? Do you know that I can call down lightning from heaven and strike you dead right now? I mean, he could have, and everything he said would have been true. But a gentleman does not boast. He may have all of these things. He may have fine things. And there's nothing wrong with having fine things. You might have a really expensive watch and an expensive ring and maybe a very expensive suit like a Xenia suit or a Tom Ford, for example, or a Rolex watch, if that's your thing, or maybe a Patek and all of that. But you wear it because you like it, not because you want to flaunt it, and every time you're talking, you want to make sure that people see your watch and stuff like that. That's not the point that's not how a gentleman behaves. So having nice things does not really define who he is. It may add, to his overall, in Tagalog we say dating, to his overall, how he comes across. And there's nothing wrong with that. But his identity is not in, he can be wearing a Timex instead of a Rolex and still carry it well because he is a gentleman. The watch does not make him a gentleman. He adds value to the watch, really, when you think about it. See, you don't let the things that you put on or the things around you or the car that you drive add value to you. You add value to the things around you. That's how a gentleman thinks. So a gentleman is not proud, although equal with God. He didn't use it for his own benefit, and he never promoted himself. He liked to be low-key. You'll notice that about Jesus. He was low-key. In fact, many times when he would heal someone, he would say, don't tell anyone about this, okay? Just go to the priest and make your own sacrifice there and give the offering for your healing and all that stuff, but you don't have to make a big deal out of this. And that's so gentlemanly. See, where you don't flaunt who you are or what you have. See, the reason why people brag, one of the reasons why people brag, or one of the reasons why people flaunt what they have, is because of insecurity. I have to have a nice watch so you will think well of me. I have to have nice hair and a nice ring and a nice shirt and expensive clothes so that you will think highly of me. Because if you saw me without all these things, you might not like me. You might think I'm a nobody. And so I have to have that expensive car, maybe a BMW or Mercedes-Benz or a Rolls-Royce or a McLaren or something to add to who I am, because in my eyes, I'm this small. And I don't want you to see how small I think I am. And that's why we compensate. A gentleman is secure in who he is. And so he can wear shorts and an undershirt, but he's not diminished by it. It takes more than just what you wear. And over the next few weeks, we're going to deal with that and talk about how do we build that confidence? Where do we get that confidence in the first place? This is not something that you can just conjure. It's not just something you can work out of nothing. Okay? It doesn't work that way. But there is a way, and that's the good news. There is a way. So let's move on. Okay? In verse 7, it says here, instead, he gave up everything, even his place with God. He accepted the role of a servant, appearing in human form. So we see here that a gentleman is generous with his possessions. He's not stingy. A gentleman, because he's secure in who he is and in what he can do, he knows how to be generous. See, an insecure person will not be generous. An insecure person tends to hoard things and keep things. But a secure person will be willing to share because he knows that God is also his source. God is his provider. And so he can afford to share. And so a gentleman is also gracious with his things. And there are people like that. It doesn't mean that that's the only thing, and because you're gracious, automatically you're a gentleman. Like I said, it goes beyond that. But these are little things. When you add them up, you will discover that this person is becoming more and more of a gentleman and more gracious. Okay? So here we see that he gave up everything, even his place with God. In other words, he's not stingy with these things. He's generous, but he also realizes that he was willing to give up those things. Why? Because he realized that it did not diminish him. See, even if he took on the form of a servant, when you look at verse 8, for example, it says, during his life as a man, he humbled himself by being fully obedient to God, even when that cost his death on a cross. So we see that as he came in human form, verse 7, he accepted the role of a servant. See, serving is not beneath a gentleman. A gentleman is willing to roll up his sleeves and work. Because even menial work does not diminish who he is. A gentleman will never say, excuse me, but do you know who I am? See, he doesn't have to flaunt who he is. Even if he were mistaken to be, maybe because of the way you dressed up, it so happened you entered a restaurant and what you're wearing is exactly the same thing as what the waiters are wearing. And as you're walking to your table, somebody calls you thinking that you're a waiter. You're not insulted by that. You know why? Because first of all, you don't look down on waiters as though there's something beneath you. Okay? You don't have to put yourself up by putting other people down. That's one thing. But another thing is, it doesn't diminish who you are. So here's a patron of a restaurant who made an honest mistake. It so happened you were dressed like one of the waiters. That's happened actually to me. you know. But it doesn't matter. And you can just say, excuse me, but I don't work here. And they'll just apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's okay. And that's it. You move on. You don't have to let that one incident ruin your evening when you're out with your girlfriend or you're out with your wife or with your family. And now everybody gets upset because you're upset. And because you're upset now is affecting the rest of the evening. Don't do that. It was an honest mistake. And besides, it does not diminish who you are. So what? Right? And so here Jesus, who was and is Almighty God, came in the form of a servant. And he did not consider it robbery to be equal to God. He set that aside and he said, this is okay. And when people actually not just did not see him as a rabbi, which was a man of honor in his day, but they thought he was possessed by Beelzebub, possessed by Satan himself. Didn't upset him. Not at all. See, because he knows better. He's secure in who he is. And so the Father, and let me give you a little insight here, but I'm not going to talk too much about it. See, right there in Genesis, in Matthew, for example, chapter 3, just when he was about to go and be tempted by the devil, he got baptized first. And his father spoke and said, this is my son, and in him I am well pleased. He was secure in his being a son of Almighty God. And that was enough for him. Whether other people thought that he was the Messiah, or other people thought that he was just another human being, or a son of a carpenter, or a rabbi, or worse, some demon-crazed, possessed lunatic walking around Jerusalem, it didn't affect him at all. He didn't lose his cool because of that, because he was secure in who he was. He heard from his father, you are my son. And I really want to be able to talk about that even when we talk about parenting on some other day. But that's going to be a very interesting talk, so wait for it, okay? Let's move on. And verse 8, he says, he humbled himself by being fully obedient to God, even when that cost his death on a cross. In other words, he was not committed to his reputation. See, he said, look, I'm God, okay? I'm God. I was there when the world was created. I was there before the world was created. Okay, and I don't mind putting on, the clothes of men. I don't mind putting on flesh. But at least let me die with dignity. Don't let me hang on a cross and make people mistakenly think that I am just as much a thief as these two men on either side of me. I mean, that's too much. That's beneath me. Nothing was beneath Jesus. Why? He knew who he was. He was secure in who he was. I just feel an anointing in this place right now. And I want to speak to you men right now. One of the secrets to becoming a true man and a true gentleman is to find your security in your Father, your Heavenly Father. But like I said, we're going to be talking more about that. But he was not committed to his reputation. He died on a cross like a thief. And there's so much more we can say about that, but we're going to be digressing. Even to the point of being judged a criminal. Hanging on a cross was reserved for some of the scum of the earth, criminals of the worst kind. And he was willing to be subjected to that kind of public execution for the whole world to see. But that's okay. It's for this cause that he came. Let's move on to verse 9. So God raised him up to the most important place and gave him the name that is greater than any other name. This is part of what it means to be a gentleman. In other words, here is a man who is secure in himself, and he is willing to wait for God to be the one to promote him, to exalt him. In other words, even if today's culture, in today's world. You come to a party, you don't have to sit at the table of the host because the host is some big shot in your eyes. You know, maybe he's a politician, maybe he's a rich businessman or whatever, some who's who. And it would really bring a lot of mileage to yourself if you can be seated, if not next to the host, at least in his table. You know, and a gentleman, really, it makes no difference to him. He knows who he is. He knows his worth. He can sit at the far table and it will make no difference. It will make no difference. See, he sits at the far table, and if the host wants him to come closer, he gets exalted by the host and say, "What are you doing over there? Sit here next to me." Jesus spoke about that. He was actually giving lessons on leadership, on humility, and if I might add this, on how to be a gentleman. See, because your security is rooted in who you are, it makes no difference where you sit. The chair, the table, and your companions on the table will not add to you, neither will it diminish you. So you sit next to an important person. Doesn't make you a bigger person. You sit next to the helpers. Doesn't decrease who you are. You're still you. You are secure in yourself. Jesus was like that. He was waiting for the Father to be the one to exalt him. And so even if it means dying a criminal's death, that's okay. And everybody's judging him, that's okay. He knows who he is. And he's committed to his purpose. And his purpose is not just to look good. You know, to look good on social media. There's more to life than social media. Jesus truly was a gentleman. It didn't matter what people thought of him. He understood who he was. It didn't matter his satisfaction was rooted in what God, his Father, thought of him. That's what gives a human being, even a young girl, that's what will give her her sense of security. And I will be talking more about that in our parenting talk, because I find that there is a problem that every human being faces. And without exception, every human being faces this, and it destroys us. It breaks something inside of us, even those of us who have the best parents and the best families. But it affects us more if we did not grow up in an environment of love and acceptance, especially by our parents. But I digress. So in our remaining time, and I just want to be able to share very quickly 20 traits of a gentleman. Okay, I hope I can stick to 1 hour, but anyway, let's see. First of all, I want you to understand that the idea of the gentleman grew out of the traditions of knighthood in a very dangerous period of history. And admittedly, there will be different cultures that will have their own rules of etiquette and how we are to engage with one another, okay, depending on where you grew up, what country, and what customs you have, and what is acceptable and not acceptable. However, I believe that some of these traits are universal. Meaning to say, regardless of where you come from, regardless of what country, there are certain things that are just acceptable, or rather accepted as proper gentlemanly traits. Now, as I get into this, I'm going to say this. Some feminists are not going to like some of the things that I've listed here, okay? But that's okay. You're welcome to disagree with me. You can even type out your disagreements here, and I'm okay with that. And if there's a question there, I will do my best to deal with those questions, okay? And it's not also, one of the things that, feminists, they want to be able to assert themselves, and I can understand that, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that by itself, because if we're really going to be honest, men have looked down on women for the longest time, as though they were some second-class citizen. And they're not. They are just as much created in the image and likeness of God, and that's what gives her a unique identity and uniqueness that is primarily woman. And a woman is not a man, and a man is not a woman. We are different. And there's nothing wrong with being different. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of women respond well when they are treated well. They actually like that. And this has nothing to do with being patronizing. This has nothing to do with thinking that women are less or weak or anything like that. Nothing at all. Okay? It's just that our roles are different. And it's our differences that make us interesting and complementary. Okay? So, when I go through these 20 traits of a gentleman, it's not to put women down. Rather, it speaks more about who we are as men. And if anything is connected to women, it's not about belittling them or thinking that they are less. Rather, the opposite. It's about honoring them. I'll show you what I mean as we go along. Okay, and this is not in any order of importance. Okay, just 20 traits that of a gentleman and behaviors of a gentleman. And so I'm just going to give them randomly. And some of them I'm going to maybe give a short commentary. And that's it. Then we move on. Okay. Some of them are pretty obvious, and so we won't say too much. First is a gentleman opens doors. It's just who we are. We open doors. We open doors for women. You don't have to open doors for men. You can, and let them go ahead of you. There's nothing wrong with that. But if there is a lady in the crowd, you let her go ahead of you. And even if you're not the one opening the door, maybe somebody was closer to the door and he happened to be a gentleman and he opens the door, then you, though you're not holding the door, make sure that the ladies go ahead of you. And if there are other men that go ahead, pay them no attention. But you let the ladies go ahead of you. Now, just one quick lesson about opening doors. Some doors open by pulling. Some doors open by pushing. And some doors swing both ways. So how do we open the door correctly? Here's a little tip. If the door pulls open, then you take the door, take a step back, and pull it towards you. And then you let the lady go ahead. If the door pushes open, then you take the door, push it, and take a step in. And you go ahead of the lady, and then you block the door with your body, if there's enough space for her to come through, or you go ahead of the door, and you hold the door, and then let her walk through. Okay? So that's just a quick tip. If the door opens towards you, you pull and let her go ahead. But if it's push, you push and go in with the door, because if the door's heavy, and you push it this way, you're going to be struggling. You're struggling this way, trying to hold it, and just when she comes in, you get so tired, and bam, we hit her. Okay? So the easiest way is you just walk straight through. That's the gentlemanly way. Now, what if it swings both ways? Okay? If the lady is still a step behind you, then you pull and let her go ahead. But if she's right next to you, maybe she's holding your arm. As you push, if that thing goes both ways, then you push it and you go in ahead of her. She doesn't even have to let go of you. And then she follows, and then you can let go of the door. Okay? And so that's how you can do it. Now, it's just a little tip to help you deal with doors. Okay? Here's another thing about gentlemen. Number 2, he is punctual. Being punctual is good manners. If you say you're going to meet at 3, you come a little before 3. You don't come at 3:01. Sure, it's only 1 minute, but you're still late. And late is late. I mean, that's as simple as it is. You are punctual with your time. Okay? Why? Because you respect the time of others as well. So a gentleman is punctual, and punctual is at least 5 to 15 minutes ahead of your designated appointment. And that's true for service as well, for Sunday service. If the service starts at, let's say, 9:30, you come at 9:15. Okay? Don't come at 9:31. Don't come at 9:35. Don't come at 10 o'clock. Okay? That's not how gentlemen are. You come on time, and 5 to 15 minutes before time is on time. Okay? So be punctual. A gentleman walks closest to the curb. This is something, I'm sorry, but this is one of my pet peeves. Okay? When I see, for example, here's the curb, and this is the road where the cars are, right? And so you're walking on the curb or you're walking on the sidewalk, and the lady is on the outside and the man is on the inside. She's where the cars are. I mean, you don't do that. Gentlemen stay on the side where the danger is, where there's greater danger. Okay, you always protect the lady and put yourself in harm's way, if we can put it that way. So you always put yourself between the lady and traffic. Okay? That also means when you cross the street, let's say on pedestrian lanes, you cross the street. Now here in the Philippines, cars will come from the left side first. Okay? And so you stay on the left of the lady. And when you reach the other side of the street and cars now are coming from the right side, then you switch over to the other side, passing behind her, not in front of her. You do not cut in front. Okay? Unless there's danger coming to the front, that's the only time you cut to the front. Otherwise, you pass behind her, and now you are standing between her and oncoming traffic. You always put yourself on the side of danger, and you always protect the woman. Okay? So that's all I'll say about that. Number 4, he offers his jacket. Well, I'm not wearing a jacket now because I'm seated. Okay? And I have to keep the aircon low, otherwise you're gonna hear it on this on the video. So it's a little warm right now. But he offers his jacket. Sometimes you might go out to dinner or on a date or maybe watch a movie and maybe you have a jacket on and she doesn't, and she's a little chilly. Don't just put your arm around her. If you're watching a movie, you can do that. But if you're across the table, you can't do that. So you take off your jacket and cover her with it. That way she's protected from the cold. Okay, so just a little something for you there. Number 5, he helps her to be seated. He actually allows her to sit down first. And if the waiter does not, if you're in a restaurant, the waiter does not hold her seat, then you do it. You don't go ahead and take your seat first. You don't even go to your seat and then wait for her to take her seat and then wait for her to sit down before you sit down. That's a little bit better than sitting down ahead. But still, you don't do that. So you go over to her side, you grab the chair, you pull it back, give her enough space to enter, push it towards her knees. She can feel it at the back of her knees, knowing that it's safe. Don't push it in, right? Just let her feel it. And as she bends her knees, you push it a little bit in. And if it's still too far, her tendency is to kind of scoot, right? You help her. As she scoots in, you help her. Then you can go over to your side of the table and take your seat. Okay? And since we're talking about restaurants, let me just go ahead and say this, okay? A proper gentleman will not even let his date, whether a girlfriend, his mom, his wife, his sister, or even just a friend, a female friend, okay? All transactions in a restaurant must be done by the men, by the gentlemen. See, in the olden days, not here in the Philippines, but in Europe, they would have separate menus for men and for women. The women's menus had no prices. There was no price list on the orders of the food, of the dishes. Okay? It was only on the men. That way the women will not feel embarrassed to order anything she likes because she has no idea how much it is. See? And the men are the ones that will have the prices so they will know. how much he or she will be ordering. But all transactions with the waiters are done through the gentleman. Even if she wants a glass of water, she will tell you, and you will be the one to tell the waiter. So at no time does the waiter ask her anything. So if there's anything she wants, she will say to the gentleman. The gentleman can ask questions. She could say like, I'd like some coffee. Says, what kind of coffee would you like? Would you like a cappuccino, an espresso, a latte? And she might say, well, I just want brewed coffee. Would you like it with cream? How much sugar do you want? See, that way, he knows everything. Whatever the waiter asks about that order, he knows. He doesn't have to turn to her and say, ma'am, would you like your coffee with cream and sugar? No, he should know that. Okay, just gentlemanly thing. Number 6, he is courteous. He's always courteous. Okay, that's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm going to just move on. Number 7, he offers his seat. If you see a lady, maybe you're in a bus or some public transportation, or maybe you're waiting in line in a doctor's office perhaps, okay, and you're seated, and then you see a lady come in, even if she is not elderly, you give up your seat and you give it to the lady. It's a gentlemanly thing to do. And with your date or your mom, you offer your arm. Something for her to hold, especially when you go upstairs. When you're going upstairs or you're coming downstairs, okay, down the stairs, you offer your arm so she has something to hold, so she doesn't have to hold the banister or the railing. She doesn't have to hold that. It's enough that she holds you. Okay? And you want to position yourself so that in case she slips, like she steps on her dress or whatever, and she stumbles, you are in a position to hold her, to catch her. So you're not just walking and she's holding you. You're actually keeping one eye on her. So anytime that she slips or trips, you can catch her. Okay? Number 9, he has table manners. He actually sits upright. You don't sit like this. It really doesn't look nice. You sit like this, and we can actually have a whole session on how to eat at a restaurant. My mom taught me a lot of things about this. I've taught this to some of my pastors before. Okay, even how to hold your spoon. And if you're really in a fancy restaurant and you've got several spoons and several knives and several forks and some more spoons and forks up here, where do you start? You've got your soup spoon, and maybe if you've got some fruit, you've got a fruit spoon, right? Normally they serve fruit in the beginning, unless you're in a Chinese restaurant. They always serve it at the end, which is actually not healthy, but that's another thing. And so you'll know which spoon to use and which knife goes with which fork, and which knife is for the salad and which is for the fish and which is for the chicken and which is for the beef if you have steak. And things like that. I mean, he has table manners. He doesn't slouch. He doesn't put his face near the soup and just doesn't do that. Okay? Little things that all add to your table etiquette. Okay? And I don't know if you can see my feet, my legs from this angle. Okay, but you don't swing your legs back and forth this way while you're talking, because it makes you move and it doesn't look nice. Okay, you be still, not stiff, relaxed, but upright, and you are attentive to her. She might need something, you can anticipate what she needs. Maybe her glass of water is going down, her glass of wine is a little low and it needs refilling. You can call the waiter, or you can pour it yourself if the bottle is next to you. Okay, but normally you call for the waiter to do that. Okay, so he has table manners. Number 10, he picks up the check. Yep, gentlemen pick up the check. But Joseph, I'm just a student. I want to take my girlfriend out, and I can't afford, I want to take her to this nice restaurant. She wants to go there, and my girlfriend is liberal. She doesn't mind Dutch treat, KKB, right? She doesn't mind going Dutch. And that's true. There are women that don't mind going Dutch, but that's not the point. It doesn't matter whether the lady is willing or unwilling to go Dutch. It's who you are. You pick up the tab. And if you can't afford it, don't go out. Find a job first. That's all I'll say about that. Number 11. He is not rude to people. He's just not rude. Okay? He's secure in himself, and so he can afford to be gentle and kind. Number 12, I already said, he is attentive. Especially if you're out on a date, you're attentive to your date. Be it your mom, your sister, your friend, girlfriend, or wife. Especially wife. Especially wife. Be attentive to her. Number 13, a gentleman keeps his word. He doesn't break promises as far as he's able. He keeps his word. Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't be fickle-minded. Okay? You're a gentleman, be that way. Where are we? Number 14, he keeps confidence. He knows how to keep secrets. If it's a secret, it stays with him. And if that secret leaks, it's never because of him. He knows how to keep confidence. Number 15, a gentleman never puts a woman down. Never jokes in such a way that it demeans, it embarrasses, or it diminishes the value of a woman. Sure, the joke might be funny, but not at their expense. And even though it may be funny, it's not in good taste. You can also tell the values of a person by the kind of jokes they laugh at. It's not proper to laugh at crude jokes because, well, it's rude. And so a gentleman does not find things like that funny because it puts people down. Whether it is the opposite sex or other men, it doesn't matter. A gentleman is not rude. Okay? Number 16, a gentleman never hits a woman. Let me tell you something straight now. There is no excuse to hit a woman. Even if she attacks you, run. Run. If you have to defend yourself, defend yourself. Now, the only time you probably will have reason to strike is if she is armed. And you will have to disarm her. And in the process, you might have to be a little rough. But you're doing it to protect yourself and perhaps your family. Okay? Who might be with you. And yes, but under normal circumstances, there will always be exceptions to the rule. But under normal circumstances, a gentleman never hits a woman. He might be angry. Fine. Express your anger in a kind way. I know that's not easy, but express your anger well. Don't be petty. A gentleman is not petty. Okay? He doesn't fight over small things. Certain things you just let it slide, you know? But that's part of what it is to be a gentleman. Don't hit women and don't be petty. Number 17. A gentleman waits for others before eating. Maybe you're in a party and you've got a long table or a round table, and you've made sure that your date, your wife, whoever, is seated, and now you're sitting next to her. And even though the host says, go ahead, dinner is served, and now you may take, okay? You may take food for your wife and even food for yourself, but you wait until everyone in your table has taken food, and then you start eating. It's an old, gentlemanly tradition that many people don't even know about anymore now. And people might say, oh my gosh, that's so over, you know, it's so OA and all that stuff like that. But it's not. It really isn't. It's just gentleman. It's just good manners. Okay? We're almost done. Number 18, a gentleman is honest. He doesn't lie. He speaks the truth gently, courteously, graciously, but he always speaks the truth. I think that's pretty straightforward. Number 9, he is protective. I've kind of touched on it by the way you walk on the curb, right? You protect your female partner, okay, whoever she might be. You protect her. Even if you're just friends, you still do that. It's just the right thing to do. Okay, you are protective. You don't allow people to bully women, and so you are willing to step up to the plate and defend the ladies, even if they are not your date. Okay? There's just no excuse to bully ladies. And finally, some of you might take issue with this, and if you do, that's okay. You can go ahead and write down your comments, but I'm going to say it anyway. A gentleman always wears a fragrance. That's right, cologne. He always puts cologne. And there's a right way to put cologne, but I'm not here to talk about that. The important thing is you just smell good. It's a gentlemanly thing to do. You don't want to be flat, and worse, you don't want to smell like sweat. And I realize that sometimes, for those of us who commute, it can be a little bit of a challenge because it gets hot, especially here in the Philippines. You ride a bus, you ride a jeep, it gets hot. And so if you carry something with you, if you carry a bag with you or something, you can put some cologne there. You just have to make sure that your cologne will not clash with your perspiration. Okay? But there may be exceptions to the rule, like I said, even for this one. But my point is, basically, if you're going, let's say, especially if you're going to a party, you're going to the office and things like that, you want to smell good. It's just a courteous thing to do. Smell good. So that's it. Those are the 20 traits. And my time, actually, if I'm not mistaken, I am over time. But I hope you learned something today. And this is only the beginning. There are other things we're going to be talking about, what it means to be a man in general, not just a gentleman, but what it means to be a man. But because this is the gentleman's hour, I just really wanted to start with something like that, something that I have inherited from my mom, and like I said, for which I am forever grateful. And these are things that I've passed on to my sons, and even to my daughter, to be a lady. My sons, so that they too know how to be a gentleman, how to open doors, where to walk, how to treat the ladies, and so on and so forth. Because I am proud of it. I'm proud to be a gentleman. I'm proud to know how to conduct myself, how to think properly, and to be sober-minded and all of that. And I pray that for those of you that desire to do that, well, hopefully you've learned a few things, and if you want to learn a little bit more, join us again next week. And we're going to be here, same time, next Tuesday, 4 o'clock, at the Gentleman's Hour. And like I said, you have questions, write it down, okay? And I will do my best to answer your question either in the comment section as well, or perhaps next Tuesday, for those that need a little more explanation, I will give it here. Okay, but feel free to share this video with your friends, maybe your male friends, your female friends. It doesn't matter. This is for everyone. Okay, so feel free to do this. There is no copyright on this, and we just want to be a blessing. And in a world where there is so much violence and chaos, a gentleman is always a breath of fresh air. And tomorrow, same time, we're going to be talking Ladies' Hour. And so we're going to see what is it to be a lady. And so you don't want to miss that. Even you gentlemen out there may want to watch that and discover what a lady is like. Okay, so I hope to see you tomorrow, and I hope to see you next week. Until then, God bless you and have a pleasant afternoon. See you.